Jamal Hakim and Michael Ray. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Leonie.
Hi, Leonie. Lovely to meet you, and thank you so much for having us.
So, looking forward to our conversation today. For those listening, I'm joined with Mayor candidate Jamal Hakim and family expert Michael Ray, and we're going to be talking a bit about the proposed family policy. Now, I want to say up front that this caught my attention because as you know, we're a parenting podcast. I've been speaking to hundreds of parents for the last 4 years, and I'm a parent myself, and I understand the burden that a lot of what is happening in our macro environment is having on us in our households. You know, things like cost of living crisis, trying to juggle work and family. All of these things are always coming up in conversations with our guests and, you know, in my own household too. And so for those of you who are listening who might be like, well, I don't necessarily sit in Melbourne, I might be elsewhere. I think this is going to be a really rich conversation to better understand how our governments, how our workplaces, how even us individually can start creating a bit of change to better, I guess, reduce that burden that a lot of us are feeling. And I feel as though this family policy has so many great initiatives that, I'd love to touch on. First, just to kick it all off, Jamal, I'd love a brief introduction from yourself to our audience, and also I'd love a reason as to why you felt it was important to create a family policy, knowing that a lot of the other candidates have not done so.
Thanks, Leonie. A really good question. And, ultimately it comes back down to what's the role of government? And I've been thinking about in running for Lord Mayor, why do I want to run Lord Mayor? And it's for the people of Melbourne. And people make up business, people make up our community. And there's a growing number of community members who are bringing their families into the city. Like where I live in Docklands, I'm a resident of Docklands, and I've seen Docklands transform from the suburb that had transitory people coming, working, young people coming for jobs, leaving, migrants coming and then moving out into the burbs. But in fact, now we've got a brand new primary school and so many families that are starting to choose Docklands as home. That's happening across the city. It's happening in South Bank. It's happening in all over our municipality. So families are really critical. But also, when we think about families, it's not just your traditional family. We've got so many different family units in place. And this is where Michael and I, have been having conversations over the years about this and where this came from. This didn't come out of nowhere. We've been having lots of conversations about how do we support families. And it includes single dads, it includes grandparents, our intergenerational families, it includes same-sex couples. Our families are broader than just 2.5 people, as the average might seem, because as Australia and as Melbourne, we are a diverse and multicultural community. So I wanted to champion as a local government, as the capital city government, what our community looks like and how we can support families live and grow right here in the city as our population doubles.
Yeah, I love that. Jamal, sorry, on your end, we can edit this, but I'm just checking. Do you have strong internet? Because it was dropping in and out a little bit. Can you just check your internet connection and just check that you are on the strongest internet? I'm hoping Riverside still picks up, and it doesn't get choppy, but was it choppy for you a little bit, Michael, in listening to
very.
Jamal? Yeah. I just don't want to lose this good content. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's all right. Might be on Wi-Fi. I can switch it to the phone if that's better. The Wi-Fi
Maybe just so that we don't. Yeah.
Let me switch it onto another network on my phone because I think my phone might actually be more
Okay.
with the 4G.
Okay. Sure.
Gotta love technology, don't you?
I know, it's usually the two things I always say. It's like, do you have a Chrome? Because that's also always a bit of a hindrance, no? And then the other one is the internet, because just depending on where you are, it can be a bit choppy and just.
We're really lucky in our neighbourhood. We were one of the first ones, and we've actually got it right to the house, the broadband, so it doesn't.
Right.
So it's so quick here. It's the quickest I've ever
So good.
Let me just put that.
Can't complain with
But
that.
it's usually, you turn the computer on, every time there's something that you've got to go, there's an update that's halfway through and it's
Yes. Yeah. I'm hoping it captured. I mean, look, we've got the audio from the backup, so that should be okay. Hence why I mean, on Jamal's end, so that should be okay. But I just didn't want to risk continuing off.
Yeah, it makes it very hard to respond for me because I
That's
think I got about
exactly
every 10th word.
right. Yes. Yeah. So
Sorry about that. It's usually quite good, but I think that we've had a few issues with the internet in this building.
yeah, okay.
I was hoping it'd be fine,
Yeah.
but
I think Nick Reese had something to do with it, Jamal.
probably. Okay, I'll try now. Reconnecting onto the other.
And now he might drop out for a second because if he's trying to change networks. Hopefully we get him back. Yeah, it looks like. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, just. Oh, sorry, I've been putting the password in wrong. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so we're on a new network.
We're on the new network now. So
Okay, we'll give that one a go.
hopefully this one should be okay because it's 4G.
Yep, no
Cool.
problem. Okay, perfect. So, can you just let us, for our benefit, Jamal, what was the last thing? Oh yeah, you were sort of just, oh yeah, that's better. Even the clarity looks a bit better now. You were sort of explaining, do you remember the very last thing you said so we can?
Yeah. The last thing I'm saying is, it's really important for families, gender diverse, from single dads, from grandparents and cousins. We've got such a multicultural community as well, so intergenerational families, and we're doubling our population as well in the city of Melbourne and across Melbourne. So we will see more families choose high-rise living, and so making sure that we're supporting families to live and grow up here is really critical. So they shouldn't have to move to the suburbs to be able to get the best of all worlds. And I want everyone to feel at home in the city, regardless of who they are and their family structure.
Yeah, I love that. And Michael, the author of the book Who Knew and family expert, why did you want to get involved in this particular policy? What was the draw card for you?
Oh, Leonie, we'll just, the family expert thing, the expert's doing a fair bit of heavy lifting there. Advocate, definitely. Jamal and I have been aware of each other's work for, it's got to be 10 years now through the wonderful internet machine, and I've been a big fan of his previous work in the reproductive area, and Jamal's sort of been a bit of a cheerleader for me. But I've been banging on about this stuff and knocking on doors with no real success, and then fortunately Jamal reached out in his campaign and said, Michael, the stuff that you've been going on about that we are so in lockstep with, I'd actually like to incorporate that into a family policy. So how would you like to contribute a bit? And count me in. Previously, I'd gone to the Victorian State Government about renaming and repurposing and expanding the scope of the maternal and child health centres after having been a sole parent to my daughter, so just me and her, and finding myself, although going there, not really feeling welcomed or catered for or included. And then the further I got into this fatherhood gig, the more barriers that I found and the more challenges I found. I think it was Pope John Paul 60 years ago said it's easier for a father to have children than what it is for children to have a real father. And while we're striving to finally get that women's equity in, until men are enabled, encouraged and respected and accepted, not only as equally responsible, but equally capable for raising the next generation, none of that stuff's going to matter, because we see it now. We see such prolific reporting on women's burnout, and it's because we've built a 3-lane freeway into the workplace for women, and we've got a rickety old staircase behind a hidden door for men back into the home. And if we take it right back to basics, when it comes to family, if dads can't, mums must. And we need to get through this thing where it's women don't simply become mothers, people become parents. Trying to find a change table. This is another one of Jamal's brilliant initiatives that he's taking on. Change tables in male toilets. Currently, 1 in 5. So that's our single dads. 1 in 5 single parent households are now fathers. We're also the fastest growing family demographic in Australia, estimated to increase 40 to 65% by the 2041 census. Now, we went through and we retrofitted, we put syringe disposals in every male toilet in the country, but not change tables. So the inference is, are men more likely to be diabetics or drug users than actually change a nappy? And it doesn't just stop there, Leonie. Our children see it. So girls walk in, they see change tables. One day that'll be me changing bubs. Our little boys don't. And while there are change tables in parents' rooms, throughout the city of Melbourne, there are way more male toilets than what there are parents' rooms. So I know as a dad, having to change my daughter's nappy in the boot of the car or on my lap or on a park bench was often the only resource that was available. So when we talk about Melbourne used to be the most livable city in the world, this will do it, because as far as livable goes, as far as population goes, the family's a fundamental group in society, and it's the environment where our children grow and thrive. And when both parents are enabled and respected and encouraged as equal caregivers, that's what will return us to the most livable city in the world. Jamal's setting Melbourne up to be the pinnacle, the place where they can look and go, you know what? It's not that hard. It's not that difficult. This is how you do it. So instead of going, gee, why are only 5% of men taking their paternal leave? It's because, there are those jokes. How was your holiday? You're taking all 6 weeks. All of these little microaggressions for dads. And that just puts more pressure on mum. Mum's got a great career and all the rest of it, and she still gets, but what about your children? They've got a father. It's fatherhood and motherhood, definitely different, but it's never less. Fatherhood is never less. We may go about things differently, we may have our own ways, but we both contribute unique strengths and benefits for our children. And Jamal's vision for Melbourne, I want to move there.
Yeah, I'm interested, Jamal, in those insights that you've gotten over this time. Where else are you seeing gender discrepancies, and how, we mentioned that the change tables in male toilets. What else are you seeing around the city, and what are the things you're proposing?
So it's in the workplace as well, Leonie, and you're right. And this comes back down to gender equity. It's like, if we want to improve gender equity, we've got to create a platform and an environment where everyone is able to deliver on all these things, including parenting. And we see that in the workplace. So when a family is set up and there's children, it is exactly as Michael said, often seen as men have to be back at work and women taking time off and can't come back to the office. So we've got to change the conversation to say, actually, men are capable and they can be responsible, and let's give them that opportunity. That allows women to then perhaps come back to work if that's their preference, and if they're the breadwinner. And I've got so many friends who have got these reverse relationships from the norm, which is ridiculous. But it's because everyone is different, and we've got to allow for these opportunities. And right now for them, it's difficult socially because it's always this difficult conversation that's, but why is your husband the one who's at home? Or why are you going back in the office? And it's this shame that we put people in, particularly for women. And again, this is a gender inequity issue. It's like women will get attacked for coming into the office, but men won't if they're working long hours because they're having to work harder for a single income. And it's seen as the manly thing to do. But in fact, it's creating a population of kids who then don't see their fathers, who lose out on that fatherhood aspect for the men as well, and lose out on having their dads at home. So we've got to make sure to that. So with this program, what we're doing, we're putting a grant program together for workplaces as well, so that they can facilitate child-friendly workplaces. And we're going to create our own best guidelines with parenting organizations, so that we can provide a guideline for workplaces and retail places as well, not just work offices, but a place where you shop, so that we can create child-friendly places. That mean that more people, men, women, grandparents, whoever, whether you're at work or you're going out shopping, can bring their kids, so that kids are part of our day-to-day life, part of civic life, part of work life. And where this comes from, when I was CEO at MSI, we had a single mom who couldn't afford not to be out of job for too long. She wasn't being supported. She had to come into the office for her job because of the role, and she directly reported to me as CEO. So at the time I went, what are we going to do? So I made my office available. I said, basically, bring your kid in, particularly in the early periods where you need that help. And you know what? I'll help. I love kids. And maybe that's a bit of a difference, but we made my office available for changing, for caring, for just that time out, so that if there's any noise issues, it's not causing noise for others. We weren't a huge office, but we were predominantly a women's office. It was a women's sexual reproductive healthcare business. And everyone was very supportive. And this kid grew up so socialized. And to this day, that we've got a special relationship. And she was able to come back to work, continue to support her family, and feel like she didn't have to make a choice between work and home and family life. And this is exactly it. And it happens a lot, I think, to dads, especially because they come back into the office and they can't bring kids in. If we create family-friendly workplaces and child-friendly workplaces, it means that dads can bring their kids in once a week, or whatever it might be. It means that people are reducing the time that they're traveling, for example, or having to do different things. It's socializing kids in different ways. It's also reducing that cost of living for families. Childcare is expensive. And we know a lot of people are choosing to stay at home and work from home because it's expensive to put kids into childcare. That's impacting directly on workplaces and the economy here in the city. So when we talk about bringing people back to the city and back to offices, we've got to create the environment to incentivize them. And, ultimately, I always say, and I guess, part of this, it's to kind of really, I think it puts it really nicely. They say it takes a village to raise a child. And what I'm saying is Melbourne's going to be that village. It takes all of us.
Yeah, I love the concept. I'm going to play devil's advocate. So I'm an employer. I'm already under a huge amount of cost pressure. I've got this building that I'm renting in the city. We've got all my employees, and I want to ensure I'm getting 10 out of 10 from people, because guess what? I'm bleeding money too, and it's a tough market. If I'm okay, so we're put on that hat. What would you say to those who would be like, well, am I going to then get the best out of my people? Is it going to be distracting? Are people going to be going to visit their children in the child mining facility, because it's so close more often and then therefore the work will be compromised? What would you say to the skeptics?
I'd say, in fact, it does the opposite, because right now people are working from home and they are distracted. And we see that. And I've seen that as well with my staff. It's really difficult to not be distracted when you're at home and kids are used to that home environment and they want your attention and you're trying to work. So what are you going to do? So you're having to make these choices. You're either completely ignoring your kids, and that creates a really difficult environment and future trauma, or you're compromising your work, or you're working really long hours and people end up then working in the night after kids go to bed. And that's not really good. So it actually does the opposite, because it makes sure that your staff are fully there, because they know their kids are in an environment that's caring, whatever that might be. And this is why the guidelines need to be, and the programs need to be those that work for that business as well, because every business is different. Everyone will have different needs as well. So customizing that, having the grant program to support businesses there, so they're not having to do a huge outlay of funds. And that will, in fact, bring back rewards multiple fold once you've got the program in place, because also you'll attract employees, you'll attract the best talent who want that balance. We're seeing more and more people now demanding balance, and people are changing jobs because they want balance in their lives. And they've realized after the pandemic what matters. And what matters is family, friends, and community. So business has got to wake up and actually recognize that the way to engage people and the way to get the best talent is to actually create an environment that supports people. By supporting people, they support you as well. I think that will bring rewards. Research has shown when you support people bring their full self to work, turnover is high. Same with how diversity. When you bring in diverse communities into the workplace, that includes families, you actually maximize outputs, because you're getting inputs from people who are actually in community. So your product, your service, whatever it is, then reflects your community, and you maximize your turnover.
Michael, I'd love
I'll jump in there, Leonie.
Yes.
Sorry, the research is unequivocal and irrefutable here as far as it goes. Thinking that this is a cost on business rather than an opportunity is equivalent to treating your staff just like inputs. They're just cogs in a machine, and the machine keeps breaking them, and we'll just keep replacing them. Staff turnover, staff morale, productivity, all down, and we're just going, all right, we'll move them out. How long does it take to get somebody back up to speed? In a recent suit tie stroller by Blake Woodward, if you look it up, they did a survey of fathers, and 84% of fathers said they would genuinely consider changing jobs to maintain the level of family involvement that they had during COVID, to maintain that. So that's talent walking out the door. But we also need to realise what a massive untapped and wasted marketplace we have of experienced and expert women that are simply going, it's too hard because dad can't do it. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency reports that despite 70% of Australian workplaces having a flexible working policy in place, less than 2% have set targets for men's engagement in it. So while it does fall predominantly on women, it impacts men as well. Because when we talk about the gender pay gap, it comes right back to the beginning, which Jamal's policies will address, because most of it has its origins in the time out of the workplace for women, but it also removes that incentive for bosses that might go, childbearing age woman, childbearing age man, you know what? I might just hire the man. I know it's against the law, but if I don't say it, if I hire the bloke and he has kids, this is a bloke who want to put his head down and work harder, because society says for you to be a good dad, you got to be a good provider. So not only will I hire him, but then because I want to support him, I'll give him more opportunities to progress, because if he can take more money home for his family, then I'm supporting his family and I feel good about it because I'm helping him be a good dad. But the gender pay gap, however it's calculated, around 14 to 18%, I often say to people, great, I will give you 25% of my income not to miss those first days at school, those school plays, those sports days, those days when you drop your child at daycare and they're screaming, don't go, don't go. You know, take 50% of my pay, give me those, and I'll take it every day. There's, we need that balance where we need to be able to go, mum's got it 2 days a week, dad's got it 3 days a week. We need to ensure that what happens between families in that relationship is decided by the families and not magnified or muted by the policies and the systems that we have in place. So,
Yeah.
there are some men that find great fulfillment and rewards in their career, and there's nothing wrong with that, like nothing at all. And there are many women do as well, but there are many of us, for me, it doesn't matter what happens outside of the home, good, bad, or indifferent. There's nothing that's not made instantly better than coming home and having my daughter in my lap and wanting to talk to me. That's only going to last for a few more years, and then suddenly I guarantee I'm not going to be cool anymore. So I want it while I can get it, and
Yeah.
workplaces shouldn't be getting in the way.
And I'm curious the practicality of it. So the way you see it is what most businesses, would be able to essentially put their hand up, and there's certain grant money available to some businesses. I guess that's my first question. And then secondly, would there sort of be, I'm assuming, a designated area that would have to be, that would accommodate the children, and then certain carers that are there too? What if there's different ages of the children? Practically, how do you see it working?
So, and look, that's why the guidelines are so important. So, working with parenting organizations to create a guideline that then recognizes the different needs and different types of organizations and spaces is really critical, because some businesses are smaller, some businesses are larger. They'll have different types of employees as well. They'll have, and it might change over time. So, people will probably need different ways of doing things at different times. Or depending on the needs of their employees. So the number one thing is to create a guideline that supports creating spaces and programs that deliver that, because not everything has to be delivered in that same office. Sometimes it's collaboration among offices, say it might be collaboration with a care provider nearby. And we did that similarly with creative spaces. And this is what government's really good at: collaborating with private and with universities to create best practice and guidelines that are practical and available for use by business. So those creative spaces guidelines, for example, that we created, now provide anyone who wants to create creative spaces, landlords, for creative businesses, with guidelines to get things that work. And it gives them options for, depending on their art, their creative business, or their budget. So I see that being the same for child-friendly workplaces and retail spaces. So we can provide these guidelines that you then pick out the one that works for you and you can implement it. The grant system is an additional one, particularly for those who want to try new things, who want to innovate, showcase, or might not have the funds to make it a reality. And obviously, it's always, a competitive process. So there'll be things around that. But it's really critical that we support all businesses in one way or another to be able to make that happen. And it comes down to, who are the employees and how much that employer cares about their employees, and if they want that additional advantage, if you like.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious. Obviously, there are different elements to this policy that I've looked at. And what I love about it is there's a huge amount of focus around acknowledging that the cost of living for us Aussie parents is quite high, and there's a lot of financial pressure on us all. And there were components of the policy like the local family card, where we're offering discounts on council-run services like the swimming pools and leisure centres and things like that. Even the Melbourne's toy library, which I'm a big fan of. And putting more investment into that, because I used that, throughout COVID even, and to be able to just, have those extra toys that my kids were going to get sick of after a week, and I could hand that toy back and then get a new toy. So was that a real focus for you both? And I guess, Michael, you're very much in the research, you're out there in the market speaking to families all the time. Is that why you sort of, in building this policy, were you really thinking about, all right, well, what are the pain points for us as parents, cost of living being a big one, and therefore how can we ease them? I'm just curious as to how it evolved.
100%, Leonie. And as a sole parent, there was a stage there where I was paying more in childcare than my mortgage, and it simply wasn't sustainable. And thank goodness that I've got the most amazing mother who was fortunate enough to be able to look after my daughter. Otherwise, I would have been destitute. Simply could not have coped without it. And this is happening over and over and again. And we constantly hear about childcare being an impost on women returning to the workforce, which it is, but it's also locking men out of some of the best aspects of parenthood. So if dad's average wage is $2,200 and mum's average wage is $1,600, well, that's not again a decision that's made, without being influenced by the environment. It's, well, dad may have a boss that he dislikes, a career that's not really a career, it's just a way of putting food on the table, and he desperately wants to be with his kids, but he has to sacrifice that. So this whole men are winning, women are losing, we need to get rid of that, because that's a stereotype. And both the problem and the power of stereotypes isn't that they're untrue, because we all see examples of them. It's that they're incomplete and insufficient. They make one story the only story, and it kills us. It just kills us. So when Jamal came up with these and we sat down and we brainstormed and said, look, this is what happened to me. This is where I found it horrible. It can be soul destroying, especially when, as a parent, Leonie, we all have that guilt. Are we doing enough? I've read enough stories. Have I been too praising, not, too critical? Did I raise my voice because I had a bad day, and now is she going to be on the news for torturing small animals one day? Like, what have I done? And it's just that constant thing, and it's not unique to mums, but we dads often walk out that door with our heart on our sleeves, and we're distracted at work because we feel like we've got to work harder, but we're torn between two things. So when Jamal said, we could make the city of Melbourne, again, when we talk about the most livable city, I think that was a bit of a misnomer back in the days, because it was the most visitable city, because we didn't have a lot of residents there. But now when you see it thriving, and you see the changing face of it, and you see it after 5 o'clock and on the weekends, and when it booms, and you go, if I do want to set up a family, this is a place where I'm going to be able to walk to these resources, the built environments, the sense of community, the thriving families that do this. Like, that's why I had to jump straight on board with Jamal and just go, here are the things, the toy libraries, all these things, and they're easily done. And while none of them are the silver bullet, they all add up. And then suddenly you go, what? How good is this? And as I said, I hope the Victorian state government is looking at this and going, what? Jamal's leading this horse to water. We better drink. This isn't that hard, and it's cheap. It is dollars for donuts. The benefits derived versus the cost. When we talk about some of the stuff that we spend money on, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'd love your thoughts, Jamal. I mean, again, if I put my business hat... Oh, sorry, continue.
Sorry, you go, Liam.
Oh, I was just going to say, Jamal, I'd love your thoughts. If I was to put my business hat on, and again, I'm, please excuse my ignorance when it does come to council and governments and budgets and things like that. But if we're giving families a discount, and don't get me wrong, I feel like that is amazing. And Michael, I'm nodding profusely to all the things you're saying, because these are the little costs that all add up over time. Is that going to impact the council-run services budgets then, because perhaps they're receiving a little less income? What about the toy library? Like, if we're going to put more investment in it, do we have enough volunteers and people to help run it? I guess, again, looking at the practicality of this solution.
Yes, no, 100%. And that's a really good question, Leonie. And I think cost of living is a real crisis that's happening right now. So every level of government needs to look at how do we reduce that cost of living crisis so that we can support families, communities, everybody, businesses. And in fact, this is a real way we can do that. And we've costed this at about $500,000 a year. So for delivering the discount card, these facilities are run by council. So there's something that we can do that directly impact and support and provide with. It means that families can have access to something that's healthy. It creates healthier families. It's about health prevention. And that's part of one of our drivers at council. Everyone talks about roads, rates and rubbish, but health and supporting our communities is big part of what we do in councils. Health prevention we're probably the only level in government that actually does a lot of health prevention. And that's why it's so important for us to make the spaces that we build for community accessible for community. There's no point in having prices too high and no one coming and using it. We want healthy families to begin with, because that creates healthier communities, and that also supports business and improves our general and overall income as a council to deliver more services. So it's $500,000, I think, is a tiny fraction of the $750 million budget that the City of Melbourne has every year. And to do that towards families says that we care about families and we want to support families grow and thrive in our city. I want to see more community centres. I want to see more access to them, because we know when people come to community centres, they create community as well. That's a place where, this is my local Bath, whether it's City Bath, Carlton Bath, wherever it might be, it brings people together. And I've seen many generations, grow up through those community centres, and they also teach and they learn and they visit and they build community. The toy library is something I'm really proud of. As a councillor, I advocated and championed the toy library. We saved it from going bankrupt in the City of Melbourne, and we took it on through the libraries. And my portfolio is Creative Melbourne. So I looked after libraries directly, and libraries is one of our more accessible places. I think it's the most accessible public space you can get, because everyone's welcome and it's free. And so we wanted to make sure that toy libraries became part of that program. And so what I want to do is actually make it even better. We need to broaden that. Now that it's part of our library network, toy libraries should just be a regular part of every one of our libraries, should be stronger. It helps with sustainability, reuse instead of and reduce the wastage. So it's not about buying plastic and throwing it away. We know how expensive toys are these days. For many families, they can't afford to buy new toys. And what happens? They soon end up in waste. And we want to reduce waste. So it hits a couple of different things that we're targeting as a council as well, and helps community. So I think it's a win-win-win for so many, and also allows us to then work with local toy providers, for example, that are making sustainable toys, things that will last. And that's when people talk about, let's go back to the old days. I think people talk about an image of a time when there was a lot of issues. But what I always say is, let's take the things that were good in the past and bring them to the future and change the environment in the way we do things. We've got a modern community, we've got a modern family, we do things differently, but there are some things that we've lost that we should learn from, including toys that are sustainable. And they're too expensive for people to buy now. So having a toy library that makes them accessible for everybody is amazing. And I know I've got a godson who I love, and I've loved seeing him growing up. And those ages of 2, 3, 4, he's 5 now, are just so beautiful. But you see quickly how toys change and his interests change. And I've been a really good godfather, I think. Taking him out so many times on the weekends, going to the zoo, doing artistic and creative, child-friendly things, and I feel like that's the sort of stuff, if we do more of and we make it more accessible, people are not just coming into the community centre, then they're joining these activities and supporting our creatives, for example. And it means that creatives who are delivering for children will put more things on. It means that the NGV's child exhibitions will become bigger and more popular. I mean, they're already so popular. So it just shows you, when you bring child-friendly spaces in, people love it and they come. And that's what we need to do, build it and they will come. We've got them in our community already. So it's a win-win for council, and the cost is actually tiny in the scheme of things.
Yeah, right.
The cost actually decreases the higher the patronage goes up. So the biggest cost is actually in having that swimming pool there. And if 10 people use it, then the cost per person is huge. So it costs, the costs slightly go up for the running of it. But to have these facilities, we don't look at parks and go, gee, the couple of $100 million worth of land there. We go, if it's being used, look at this, we've got to make it attractive. We've got to encourage people to get there, because then healthcare costs go down, mental health is better, that sense of community goes up. The more vibrant the city is, the safer people feel. But when it's empty and soulless and people only go there to shop or work, then it sets it up as a bad place. But when we see families thriving and going, you know what, this is great. You know, my kid comes into work with me 2 days a week for before school care or after school care, or he has his sports team in there and we've got all of these group things and what activities are available. I want to move there. And guess what that does? Businesses thrive. Guess what that does? Land prices thrive. Guess what that does? Everyone wants to come to Melbourne. Everyone benefits. We start at the bottom instead of starting at the top and going, we need this great thing up here. Build it from the bottom up. Service those people there. And that's where Jamal's vision is just so exciting to see what this could do to Melbourne and for families.
Yeah, I do think it sounds so it sounds like a bit of a game changer, isn't it? It's really spinning the way we do things on its head and really looking at things as to, now that we're out of the COVID era, what makes sense for families. And in wrapping up, I mean, I think it's fantastic. We've spoken about the opportunity to have more on-site childcare facilities and the flexibility that would bring families. We've spoken about, incentivising families to use more of the council-run services at a cheaper price. And there's also mentioned there about overhaul of the city's public spaces and ensuring that they sort of are starting to meet family needs, such as change tables in male toilets and things like that. Is there any component of the policy that you think we haven't touched on that you would like to sort of finish with now?
Look, yeah, and public space is an important one, Leonie. I mean, as a council, one of our missions is creating public spaces for everyone. And so I think coming back to that premise, looking at the lens and a review as part of this policy, we're going to commission a review of all public spaces and look at how they are accessible for people with prams, people with disabilities, and make sure we work through that. We committed to putting a lift at the back of Flinders Street Station there next to the Clock pub. Many people would know that lift coming down to the north bank of the river. People with prams, the elderly, people with disabilities can't get down to the north bank of the river safely without spending 20 minutes going all the way around. The number of people, there's about 6 times a day, someone tries to take a pram down there. And the operators for the Yarra boats there tell me, in the ferries, tell me that they see people struggling down those stairs all the time. Between 6 people with prams, around 20 people who are elderly or have mobility issues who are trying to go down that staircase. So that's a really simple showcase of how we've committed. We'll put a lift there, and it's 2 stories basically, and it means that everyone can enjoy the north bank of the river. The rest of the infrastructure is already built. It's like there's actually accessible spaces down there, but no way to get there, which is ridiculous. So we want to make sure that's across our city, making sure our pedestrian pathways means everyone's taking part in public life. And also when it comes to planning, we want to advocate for better design. So we've got apartments and construction that recognizes families, but also intergenerational families. Many of our migrants, and we've got a community made up of around 60% of people born overseas or whose parents are born overseas. Many of our communities, in fact, have intergenerational households. And I know so many people who have 2 apartments side by side or on the same building because they've got grandparents and cousins and others and then family, and they all live in this space. So why can't we build for intergenerational families and for families so that we've got good building design? So we want to make sure we're working on good building design. Michael Smith is our number 1 candidate. He's an architect. He's been someone who's advocated for good design for a long time in Melbourne. And we want to make sure that buildings are designed for families and intergenerational families so that Melbourne continues to grow in a way that is welcoming and inclusive. And I think that just makes a diverse stock of properties, which is good for everyone, because the more choices we have, the more people come in, the more businesses are welcoming more people and seeing different people come through. It becomes a win-win for everybody. As government, we see our community grow. That creates safer spaces as well. And, with those review of public spaces as well, if you use environment design to create public spaces that are good for families, you're also making them safer. So you can create safety against crime through environmental design. And it's well recorded. There's lots of research around this. And that's what we can do as a council. We don't have a police force. We've got to work with the police. We've got to work with others. We can clean the streets, but we can also design things to make them safer. And that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I love that. Michael, final thoughts from you as far as, you are a single dad. You understand the inequality that exists out there. You understand the society norms and dynamics and everything. This is your bread and butter. Final words from you.
As I said earlier, Leonie, women don't just become mothers, people become parents. And that family is the foundational group for society and the environment in which our children thrive. If we remove the speed bumps and the friction points for parents, the kids do better. We head off a lot of the stuff that we see further down the track, the anxiety, the school refusal. We co-regulate our kids. We've got stressed, anxious parents raising stressed, anxious children. And while we're all trying to do our best, and there's no blame or finger pointing here, every parent I know is doing their best. And sometimes we actually just need to get in and help them because, as Jamal said, it takes a village to raise a child, and we really need to do it. And on Jamal's point about intergenerational families, I've studied developmental psychology, and one of the biggest benefits for children is an intergenerational family. And it's not only for the children, the grandparents thrive as well. So if we want to lessen the burden on our aged care, which is a council responsibility as well, guess what? Having them involved with their children is even better. If we want to lessen the burden on our childcare centres, which are at capacity now, guess what? Who's going to look after that child better than their grandparent? So, incentivising that multi-generational home instead of us moving away from our parents, and more than we can do to unite them, to have them heavily involved in our thing, that's the stuff that makes a difference. That's why we used to go from grandma and granddad living in the same street to now, and everyone getting together for family dinners, which now we don't have time for. Now we've got children with their own room, with their own screen in their own room, that don't have dinner together, and we wonder why the very fabric, that sense of community, is falling apart. It's because we've set up an environment where both parents are working themselves to death just to stay level, instead of going, you know what, why do we need more childcare centres? Well, the fact that both parents have to work to just get by, we need to keep asking why. Why do we need more childcare? Oh, because both parents have to work. Well, why do both parents have to work? Because of the cost of living. Well, why is the cost of living? We need to keep asking the whys instead of just treating the symptoms. We need to look back to the cause. And one of the greatest solutions at the moment is enabling men to be equally responsible for raising the next generation. So it's a genuine choice of what happens within a family, where we get rid of that pesky pay gap, where mum earns what dad earns, so they can go, you know what, it is a genuine choice. I don't like my boss, whether it be mum or dad. My career's a bit of a dead end. You carry the load at work for 6 months. I'll get involved with the kids. You can give somebody the most comfortable chair in the world and it looks great until you say to them, how's the chair going? And you're told, well, you're never allowed to stand up, so it's not that great. I'm stuck here for the rest. So it's not what we're looking at, it's where we're looking from. And Jamal's policy is the first one that's got a holistic 360. As I said, no silver bullet. We're not saying this will fix it. It's the whole concept of it. I can live in a city, you're kidding, where I can take my kids to the pool, where I'm encouraged to go this, where every week there's something to participate in, where I can walk around the street and see other families thriving in a built environment. We don't need police on every corner. The reason we need police on every corner, again, because we're treating the symptoms, not the causes. Let's get it back to the place where everyone's there.
Yeah, I love it. Very well said. Well, I'd love to thank you both for your time. Jamal, how can people find out more about you?
they can find out about me on teamhakim.au. That's TEAM, Team Hakim, HAKIM, M for mother, .au. And, as I've said, thank you so much, Leonie, for having us. It takes a village to raise a child. I want Melbourne to be that village.
Yeah, I love that. And Michael, what's next for you, and how can our audience find out more about your work as well?
You can find me at my website, michaelray.com.au, but also at the moment, Leonie, if I may, we've got a petition up on Change.org for the Victorian government to follow Jamal's lead to rename and expand the scope of the maternal and child health centres to the parental and child health centres. So if anybody thinks that I've made a modicum of sense here, if they could go to change.org and look up for Jamal, and Jamal's got his name on it as well as myself, to give the Victorian government a bit of a speed up and say, let's come into the modern century where the wonderful diversity of contemporary families, has evolved, and support all and sign.
Yeah, love that. I'll pop those details in the show notes as well. Thank you both again.
Thanks, Leonie. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, I'll hit pause.